Here's what Syracuse football needs in the transfer portal.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, and we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And folks, on today's show, we are going over Syracuse football's needs in the transfer portal. We're going to talk about what they need most, position groups that they can certainly use. However, I wouldn't necessarily pay top dollar for them. And then finally, there are a few position groups on this team where there's honestly no need, barring a sudden change. There's just no real need for it. So that's what we're talking about here on today's podcast. It's the future of Syracuse football following an excellent 9-3 2024 season. Before we get to everything, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So, transfer portal season is here. Kinda. It's kinda here because technically it doesn't open until December 9th. However, players are already announcing their intentions to enter the portal, so it's basically open, okay? But it technically opens on December 9th. It runs through December 28th. I would also like to put out a quick disclaimer that this is going to be a guideline episode, okay? We're going to go position by position, basically, and we're going to say whether or not it's a big need or not a big need, okay? We're going to start with biggest needs and work our way down. I don't want to mention any specific players in the portal because I feel like that could be used for future podcasts. And also, there's going to be so many players that enter. So it could be like every day there's a new target that Syracuse football should go after. So kind of just want to wait on mentioning specific guys in the portal. Let's just give a general outline of what Syracuse football needs. All right. So let's start with the definite needs. These are position groups you look at and you say, yep, they need to add at least one guy to it. And let's start off with the free space. This is the middle of the bingo card, okay? You can just cross it off right here. Let's get it out of the way. Quarterback position. Kyle McCord, we all love him, I think. He just had the most prolific passing season in Syracuse football history statistically, the most passing yards, the most touchdowns, the most completions in a single year in Syracuse history. He's out of eligibility, thank you, Ryan Day, for playing him in a meaningless half, but he's out of eligibility, so he's not coming back next season. They need a quarterback. It's kind of similar to last year when Garrett Schrader was out of eligibility and they got Kyle McCord. Kind of like that. They need one. They do have some in-house options, right? They got Michael Johnson, Carlos Del Rio Wilson. Those are stopgap at best options, at best. Then you got some young guys. A lot of us are high on Jakari Williams. He was a 2024 recruit. You also got a couple of 2025 guys coming in, one of them being Luke Carney, who I think a lot of us have high expectations for, considering that Locked On recruiting expert Brian Smith over the summer said he watched his tape and said, this guy could be a 5-star if he played at a different school, because that's sometimes how star ratings work. They look at what school you went to. It's kind of weird, but it's up to really coaches and the staff to determine how they view a player rather than, what a recruiting service says. But we all have high hopes for Luke Carney, right? I don't think we want to hand the keys, though, to anyone currently on the roster for 2025 to be the starting quarterback. Okay? That's just how I feel about it. It's not that I don't have high hopes for anyone. And we're going to talk about in future podcasts what the strategy should be. Should they stay in-house? Should they get a one-year transfer, a multi-year transfer? Because there are plenty of options out there of what they could do. But the bottom line, they need a quarterback in the transfer portal. So that's it. We got it out of the way. We know Syracuse football needs a quarterback. They're also going to need to revamp basically their entire offensive line because they got a lot of starters who are out of eligibility. You got both your guards, Jacob Bradford, Mark Petrie, out of eligibility. Your center, John Ray Reed, he's out of eligibility. One of your tackles, Savion Washington from Colorado this past season, he's out of eligibility. They do return some guys. They return David Wollaba, Demetrius Weatherspoon at the tackle position. Both of them obviously started games. Weatherspoon was kind of iffy when he played, but at least he's got starter experience. And Wollaba is pretty good as well. But inevitably, also, you're going to have guys who are being promoted that are currently on the roster because I don't see Syracuse football adding 4 starting offensive linemen in the portal. I don't. So I guess the way I would categorize it is I think they need to find 2. At least 2, preferably a tackle and a guard in the transfer portal if I'm Syracuse football. Because you're going to need to revamp your entire offensive line. Now, for what it's worth, they had the second lowest yards per carry in the ACC this season. That's a reflection a lot on run blocking. So if you can find some guys in the portal that are good at run blocking, I think it would be an upgrade for Syracuse football. So the first 2 needs on offense, I think, are quarterback, obviously, and offensive linemen, preferably at least 2 offensive linemen. Let's shift over to the defense in their biggest needs. Both the linebackers. That's what it is. Those are their biggest ones that we're talking about. Your middle linebackers, Marlowe Wax. He's a leader. He's a captain. He's arguably your best player on defense. Multi-year starter at Syracuse. He's going to get NFL looks, but I'm not an NFL talent evaluator, so I can't tell you for sure if he's going to be drafted or not. He'll get an invite to an NFL training camp. He's out of eligibility. It's unfortunate. I wish he could come back. But that's just how it is in college football. Not every single player out there is going to get 15 years of eligibility. Some do. I don't know how. Some do. But it's not Marlowe Wax. So we wish you well, Marlowe Wax, but he's out of eligibility. And when you look at the in-house options, we're also going to talk about the weak side linebacker here too. Justin Barron, another defensive stalwart, he's out of eligibility. When you look at the defensive options that you have in place on the roster right now, you got James Hurd. He's a young guy. I think he started a couple of games when Marlowe Wax was out earlier this season. Derek McDonald is a veteran. He was the weak side linebacker starter for a little bit this season. Now, James Hurd, I'm a little bit higher on because he's a young guy. So you got to think that he maybe has more room to grow and he can be better. And Derek McDonald, I think he's a good depth piece for next season. But I think that Syracuse football needs to add 2 starting linebackers in the portal. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments section below. What do you think are the biggest needs for Syracuse football? On defense, it's got to be both linebackers. And on offense, quarterback and offensive line are the biggest needs. There is a bonus biggest need I have for you all. Nobody, I believe, is out of eligibility at this position. How about a kicker? Why not? I don't know if there's going to be any kickers or how many there will be in the transfer portal, but if Syracuse football can get a kicker in the transfer portal, they were one of the worst kicking games in the ACC this past season. I would throw that in there as well if they can get a good kicker. So, biggest needs in the transfer portal for Syracuse. On offense, quarterback, offensive line, defense, 2 linebackers, one to replace Marlowe Wax, the other to replace Justin Barron, and your bonus ones on special teams. I think they need a kicker. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. What do you think are Syracuse football's biggest needs in the transfer portal? Because coming up, we are going to talk about kind of needs for the Orange. These are positions where maybe they could use someone in the portal, but I don't think they necessarily have to pay out top dollar in order to quote unquote fill this need. That's coming up next on Locked On Syracuse. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets in the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Now, let's talk about Syracuse basketball for a moment. They travel to Tennessee tomorrow night. Now, the odds as of right now have not been released. So let's talk about some more college football. Conference championship week this week. ACC championship, Clemson and SMU. SMU is a 2.5-point favorite. What are your thoughts on the game? Well, you can put your money where your mouth is at FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. This is Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and on today's show, we are going over Syracuse football's needs in the transfer portal. We just went over their biggest ones. Now, let's talk about what they certainly could use, but they are not the most pressing needs for the Orange. These are positions where if they add someone, that's great, but I would not necessarily shell out top dollar, top NIL money to fill this position group. Let's start with on offense. We're going to go offense, then defense. Outside wide receiver. You got Jackson Meeks, who's out of eligibility. Jackson Meeks had a terrific year coming over from Georgia. Didn't do a whole lot much with Georgia. And then this season has a massive, massive breakout. One of Syracuse's leading receivers and one of the leading receivers in the ACC. He was really impressive. And in fact, I would not be surprised if he gets a look in the NFL. I would not be surprised if he's at an NFL training camp this coming off season. I wouldn't. He had that good of a year with Syracuse football. He's out of eligibility, okay? The reason why I would say it's not the biggest need is because you have to look at who's still on the roster here. You got a 4-star in Emmanuel Ross waiting in the wings. He barely got any playing time, but he's a 4-star guy from 2024. So maybe he takes on a bigger role. You also got Zeed Haynes with eligibility. He was the starter in the first 2 games. He started ahead of Jackson Meeks, but personal issues kept him out for the rest of the season. But I still have high hopes in Zeed Haynes, and assuming he doesn't enter the portal himself, I think he can enter next season as a starting outside wide receiver for this team. Umari Hatcher, if he comes back, he's got years of eligibility left. I think we all know what he is, but am I willing to shell out top dollar to try to upgrade Umari Hatcher when we have needs on the offensive line and the quarterback position and linebacker? No. Umari Hatcher's a fine piece. Darrell Gill has eligibility. He's a fine piece. Justice Ross Simmons has eligibility. He's a fine piece. So they do, I guess, kind of have a need because Jackson Meeks is out of eligibility. So they're going to need someone to step up. But you could definitely look in-house for a replacement. It's not the most pressing need in the world. So when I go out and I see Kevin Concepcion, I know I'm mentioning a name here, enter the transfer portal, he's going to command top dollar. A lot of top programs are going to go after him. I wouldn't be mad if Syracuse football got him, but he's not their number one target. Let's just put it that way. He would not fill the biggest need for Syracuse football. So that's outside wide receiver. They kind of could use one, but it's not the most pressing need in the world. Running back and tight end, I'm going to group together here, okay? The running back's LeQuint Allen. Their tight ends, Oronde Gadsden. Both have another year of eligibility left. However, we're not sure with either of them if they're going to be back for different reasons. With Oronde Gadsden, he's most likely going pro. I think we all thought that heading into the season that this is someone who looks like he's going to be an NFL player. So that's Oronde Gadsden. At running back, we're not sure if LeQuint Allen is going pro. I'm high on LeQuint Allen. I really like him. How do NFL talent evaluators feel about LeQuint Allen? That's the question. As far as whether or not he's going to enter the transfer portal, I don't really see the reason for him to, unless some school out there is going to offer him a boatload of money to leave. I mean, I could certainly understand that. So I would say it's more likely that LeQuint Allen is back and not Oronde Gadsden. Obviously, if LeQuint Allen leaves, then running back is something that Syracuse football is definitely going to need in the transfer portal. Definitely when you look at their position group right now. But assuming Allen stays, you got LeQuint Allen, Will Nixon back from injury, and Yassine Willis again. That's your 1, 2, 3. I think we're all happy with that. Set it and forget it. But it's kind of a need depending on what LeQuint Allen decides to do. Let's assume that Oronde Gadsden leaves. I guess tight end would be a position of need, but you got a 4-star tight end waiting in the wings. Jamie Tremble. He, I think, caught 1 pass in the Holy Cross game this past season. Plus, Dan Villari, assuming he doesn't leave, is a fine backup. So I think Jamie Tremble could be the starting tight end next season, and you don't have to really worry about tight end. We're going to talk about in a future podcast coming up, while it's still kind of a need because there's someone from Purdue who just entered the portal who I think Syracuse definitely needs to go after for not just tight end reasons, but for maybe getting a big-time high school recruit. I'm hinting at a podcast coming up. But I don't think tight end is the most pressing need, even if assuming Oronde Gadsden leaves. Obviously, if he doesn't leave, then you can kind of forget tight end. But he's probably going to. Let's talk about defense. Defensive line. You got Fadil Diggs, who's out of eligibility. He had a career-high 7.5 sacks this season. I think in my bold predictions, my quote-unquote bold predictions, I don't like doing bold predictions. I just make predictions and see what happens. But I thought like I thought Fadil Diggs would have like 8 sacks. He finished with 7.5. So I was pretty close. He's out of eligibility. Wouldn't be surprised if he got NFL looks at all. You do have a 4-star waiting in the wings in King Joseph Edwards. King Joseph Edwards had 3 sacks in 1 quarter against Holy Cross. I know it's against Holy Cross, but think about what another offseason, another year of training can do for a guy like King Joseph Edwards. He could be someone who could be a 1-for-1 replacement. I think also when you look at the rest of the defensive line and who you have right now returning, Murad Watson, Rashard Perry, Dennis Jaquez, Deion Wilson, Kevin Jobity, those guys could all return for next year. I mean, they could certainly use an upgrade on their defensive line. Don't get me wrong. I just don't think it's the most pressing need for Syracuse out there. I also want to throw out a caveat here of if 5-star edge rusher Javion Hilson in the class of 2025, if he commits to Syracuse, then this position group goes from, yeah, you could maybe use one to there's no need. There's no need to really spend resources or even a lot of resources on it. Because if you got a guy like 5-star Javion Hilson, he's playing, there you go. So that's how I see the defensive line. It kind of hinges on what 5-star Javion Hilson does, who I think they have a chance at getting. I mean, they're in his top 4. They're in his top 4. We saw the season that Syracuse just had. They certainly got a lot of momentum. And with Fran Brown, you can't count him out with anyone, really. It's kind of nice having a guy like Fran Brown because you know they can be in on so many guys. Whether they're going to get him or not, we're going to have a chance. Which in the past, we would not have a remote chance at a guy like Javion Hilson. A remote chance of getting someone good really in the transfer portal. But we do with a guy like Fran Brown. He's already proven it in 1 season. I think also when you look on defense for some other could certainly use safety. Elijah Clark is out of eligibility, but you do have a 4-star in Demetrius Samuel Jr. coming in. By all accounts, he's going to sign with Syracuse very soon. Perhaps he could be a day 1 starter, but if you want to bring in some competition, fine over there. You don't have to spend significant resources. You also could use 1 starting corner. Clarence Lewis is out of eligibility. 2024 4-star Marcellus Barnes. He's supposed to be back. He's got plenty of years of eligibility left. He got hurt this season, but when he played, he was pretty good. So he's back, hopefully. Jaden Bellamy, I think, is solid, but you could probably use him more as a depth guy. You got Caleb Singleton, a 4-star corner who just committed. Maybe he's the answer at the position. And also, I'll talk about him in the signing day preview. Corner Dwayne Galloway, a 4-star corner. Maybe Syracuse can get him. Maybe he's the answer to be a starting corner, but you're probably looking in the portal for another guy. Is it the most pressing need? Again, no, but you could probably use a starting outside corner. So, what are the kind of needs for Syracuse? Outside receiver, running back, tight end, depending on really what LeQuint Allen and Oronde Gadsden do. Defensive line depends on what Javion Hilson, a 5-star edge in 2025, does. Safety, you might want to bring in some competition, although Demetrius Samuel Jr., a 4-star, probably could be a day one starter. And you're probably looking at one outside corner. Those are my thoughts on what Syracuse could sort of use, but they're not the most pressing needs. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. What position groups, in your opinion, would fill that category of could certainly be happy if they get someone in this category, but they're not the most pressing needs? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. Coming up, we are going to talk about the position groups that, let's be honest, this is a good thing. They can set it and forget it. That's coming up next. Folks, I know we're talking a lot of football here on Locked On Syracuse, but I just want to let you all know that basketball season is also in full swing, and there's going to be plenty of content here on Locked On Syracuse covering Syracuse basketball. Whether it's the NBA, college, like the Orange, going to basketball games is always pretty exciting. And the way I get tickets for games is by using Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. My favorite feature is the curated deals. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code Locked On College, LOCKED ONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. You're never going to say no to an elite talent. If an elite talent wants to play for your team, you don't say no. You just find a spot for said elite talent to play. Now, having said that, we are going to talk about position groups for Syracuse football where there's really no need to add unless it is some massive talent that you cannot pass up. He wants to play for you, and you just say, yes, come to Syracuse, it's over. Okay? Let's start with slot wide receiver. Trebor Pena, thankfully, has another year of eligibility. Maybe he's an NFL guy, but I imagine, this is just my opinion, I don't have any sourcing on this, I think he's going to be back. Truthfully, that's my thought. I think he's going to be back. And assuming Trebor Pena returns after the season he just had, there's no need to add a slot receiver. And honestly, I know I gave the disclaimer of, well, if it's an elite talent, blah, blah, blah. He's one of the best slot receivers in the country. Xavier Restrepo is out of eligibility over at Miami. He's probably the number one slot guy in the country. So there's a spot open for number one slot receiver in the country. It might be Trebor Pena. There is absolutely no need to add a slot receiver in the transfer portal because we got Trebor Pena. That's the only position group on offense where I would say there's absolutely no need. There is nothing that Syracuse needs to do. Slot receiver, you got Trebor Pena, keep him there. Defense, 2 safeties. Again, you got 2 safeties for next season. Both the starters, Devin Grant and Duce Chestnut, have college eligibility left. Barring someone elite, I don't think you need to spend big money here. Now, Devin Grant, he plays the star position. He's the 5th defensive back. Duce Chestnut is your free safety. Is Demetrius Samuel a strong safety? We'll find out, I guess. But the bottom line is they got 2 safety positions that they definitely don't need to fill. Maybe you can upgrade them, but with all the other needs that are on the roster, I don't see the point in spending significant resources unless the guys like I want to play for Syracuse. That's the only school I want to play for. And by the way, I'm like the number one player in the transfer portal, like Caleb Downs at Ohio State from last season. If Caleb Downs was in the class this time and was like, I want to go to Syracuse, and that's that, well, then fine. You have my attention. But other than that, I don't see the point in adding more than one safety because you got Devin Grant and Duce Chestnut back. Bonus for you as well. Really, it's one position group on each side. Slot receiver, two safeties on defense that they don't need to touch. Another bonus, though, is the punter. Jack Stonehouse is a terrific punter, guys. I know he didn't have to punt a lot this season. That's a good thing because we had an explosive offense. But he had a great year when he did have to punt. He averaged 45.9 yards per punt. That was higher than last season. And he was all ACC last season. I think he just had another all-conference year. So you don't need to add punter. You definitely need to add kicker, but you don't need to add punter. You're good with a guy like Jack Stonehouse. So there's not much on Syracuse where I would say there's absolutely no need. That's not a bad thing because every team is going through the same thing. Every team goes through the same thing, guys. They're going to have guys who run out of eligibility. They're going to look at their in-house options and say, is this what we want to do going forward, or do we want to add in the portal? So for a lot of schools, they're not going to have too many position groups where they're just like, yeah, there's just no need to add anyone there. And for Syracuse, that is the slot receiver. When you have Trebor Pena coming back, you got two safeties locked and loaded on defense. Your punter, he's good too. So there's no need to add to those positions. As far as what is coming up for the podcast going forward, tomorrow, I'm not going to make a promise, but I would say it's more likely than not that there will be a mini podcast going over National Signing Day and a preview for Syracuse, who the big prospects are for the Orange, and hopefully maybe their odds of landing him or how it would change the outlook of Syracuse if they were to land some of these guys. Spoiler alert, I already gave it away. Javion Hilson, 5-star edge. If they get him, it changes everything on that defensive line. Just saying. So I think that's what's coming up tomorrow as far as a mini podcast. And then tomorrow night, Syracuse basketball playing Tennessee on the road at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Hopefully the Orange can find a way to pull off a stunner. It'd be a crazy upset if they can go on the road and beat Tennessee. But regardless, there is going to be a post-game reaction podcast on Locked On Syracuse. So that's what's coming up on the podcast going forward. Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. And for your second listen, you can check out the Locked On ACC podcast. Alex Donald and Kenton Gibbs, they keep it real. They bring you the truth about where your favorite ACC team stands within the conference. You can find Locked On ACC on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this video, click that like button. If you really liked it, subscribe to the channel, turn on those notifications, tell all your friends where you can get your Syracuse content. Locked On Syracuse. Folks, before I go, just want to let you know, in the comment section below, please leave your thoughts on the biggest needs for Syracuse football in the transfer portal. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.